a health check.
Question number 2, Honourable David Parker.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Which, if any, is his greatest failing in 2013 as Minister of Finance?
Mr Speaker.
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, this question does test one's humility. Without doubt, though, my greatest failing as a Minister of Finance, as it has been for each of the past 5 years, was underestimating the damage done to this economy by the previous Labor government and overestimating their ability to understand that and apologise for it.
Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Which of his achievements is he most proud of as Minister of Finance? Is it the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the collapse of solid energy, shutting first home buyers out of the market with failed housing prices policy leading to LVRs, 150,000 unemployed, or the 3 botched asset sales that came in $1 billion short and didn't achieve widespread New Zealand ownership?
Well, Mr Speaker, just to deal with a couple of those things, actually the asset sales program has been a success, and we have, and I know the opposition are envious of the $4 billion that the government now has in the bank. And secondly, the gap between the rich and poor is actually closing. And I do regard that as an achievement given the circumstances of the global financial crisis and the severe stresses on this economy. More New Zealanders have more jobs and higher incomes, and there is some real confidence in New Zealand's future.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Well, if he doesn't like that list, is he most proud of borrowing more than $400 million a month, the uncertainty around Chorus, the UFB and his government's threats to overrule the Commerce Commission, the $30 million corporate welfare subsidy paid to Rio Tinto without a jobs guarantee, Sky City, the sluggish Canterbury rebuild, or is it the 265,000 children living in poverty that he's most proud of?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't agree with any of that. When the member mentions debt, what we can say is it's $4 billion less than Labor would have, because we've gone ahead and partially sold down some government-owned companies. And actually, with respect to the debt, the government is quite happy that it's followed a sensible program. We have borrowed pretty extensively to rebuild Christchurch, to support New Zealand's most vulnerable citizens, to support our households through a difficult time, precisely because we have a plan to get back to surplus and repay that debt. And that has been sensible, moderate economic management, which I have to say few developed countries have been able to copy.
Supplementary question, Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance. Does he consider New Zealand's net international investment debtor position of $151 billion as at 30th of June 2013, equivalent to 71% of gross domestic product and $35,000 per man, woman and child in New Zealand, as further evidence of the failure of his government's economic policy? And if not, why not?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as a member will know, that net international investment position is the result of accumulated habits of New Zealanders over the last 30 years. In the circumstances of a pretty significant recession, I actually think it is a bit better than we expected, and given the prospects for our export industries and the growing resilience and confidence of New Zealand businesses and households, I would expect it is going to continue to improve gradually over the next 3 to 5 years.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
How will his $1 billion shortfall on asset sales impact upon the $84 billion of spending his government's already promised from the $6 billion Future Investment Fund?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member seems to have his billions a bit mixed and matched between different parts of the government budget. There is a pretty simple fact. when we sold the share companies, we handed out the shares in the government companies. We handed out share certificates to tens of thousands of New Zealanders who are the proud owners of shares in large New Zealand companies, and they gave us $4 billion. So the taxpayer has $4 billion where it used to have 49% of the companies, and we can now go and invest that in public assets. And the opposition have yet to rise to the challenge of promising to buy back the assets when they say they are so firmly opposed to their sale.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Has he received any requests from the Minister of Science to use the Future Investment Fund to fund research into whether the moon landings were faked so as to satisfy his desired coalition partner?
Honourable Bill English, as far as you have ministerial responsibility.
No, Mr Speaker, we haven't, but I have had requests to investigate some of the even wackier ideas that come not from small parties, but the Labor Party. Policies which would be very bad for New Zealand, and we will be investigating some of them and testing those next year.
Supplementary question, Tim McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what further progress has the government made in 2013 in improving the range of negative economic indicators it inherited 5 years ago?
Honourable Bill English.
In the first place, I'd say the credit for progress goes to the households and businesses of New Zealand who have dealt with difficult circumstances with remarkable resilience and fortitude. And they are achieving results. The economy is growing 2.5% to 3%, one of the fastest growth rates in the OECD. We're on track to surplus by 2014-15, one of a handful of countries who will achieve surplus by that time. Back in 2008, the current account deficit was over 8% of GDP and currently sits at less than 4% of GDP. 5 years ago, inflation was running at 5%. It's now running at just over 1%. 5 years ago, mortgage interest rates averaged almost 11%. Floating rates, they're now less than 6%, although forecast to rise somewhat next year. And the tradable sector, which went into recession in 2007, is now succeeding, and we're particularly gratified that the manufacturing sector is expanding, and even more gratified that the regions are expanding, many of them faster than Auckland.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Well, then, will he agree that arguably his greatest failure as Minister of Finance in 2013 was not to use the Future Investment Fund to purchase Jerry Brownlee a larger kilt to prevent overexposure to the market, or would that have required an extraordinary appropriation?
Order. In as far as the Minister has responsibility, Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I understand that the traumatic event to which the member is referring occurred in 2012, which is outside the current budget cycle.
Question number 3, Jamie Lee Ross.
My question is to the Minister of Finance.